Hi, shalom friends. There's wisdom in the elders, found by the elders. And when you talk to the elders, especially grandparents, great-grandparents, they marvel at technology. In my days, we didn't have the internet, the cell phone, the this, the that. And little kids actually are very savvy, and they're creating their own music. And now with AI, the sky is the limit. But there's one thing that they will often mention, and that is, with all of the advancements, there's one thing that we seem to be not only not advancing, but receding. And that is something which we call maturity. It seems that the kids are growing up very quickly in certain ways, but in what we would call maturity, they seem to be being held back. And I would like to offer a possibility for that reason. Of course, how to define maturity is an issue in itself. And I remember hearing the joke, you could be young only once, but you could be immature your whole life. But what does that mean? So I would suggest that one of the signs and indications of maturity is accepting responsibility. The more responsible you are, you have to perform, you have to advance, you have to give. The more responsibilities that a person takes upon themselves, that enhances and reveals a maturity. But an adult, whether you pick the age, who refuses to get a job, doesn't want to bring in children, doesn't want to accept the responsibility of being a productive person, though he might be very intelligent, he's rather immature. Now I'll ask another question. How old do you have to be to start thinking seriously about God? Some people will say each person is different. Maybe when you're in college and you start investigating the world around you, comparative religion. Others that are more traditional will say, well, we have the 13-year-old bar mitzvah, the 12-year-old bat mitzvah. That is the proper time. And others have asked me, how old should my child be before I start talking to him about God? And I believe that there's a maturity that starts from the age of 3. And let me tell you why I believe that. One of the most charming, important midrashim that Jewish people have grown up with is the story about Father Abraham, Avraham Avinu. I'll skip the whole beginning and start towards the end. Avraham was born to a family where the king was considered, the king of that country was considered a deity, and for whatever reason, he had a suspicion that one of his servants, Terach, had a son, a newborn son, whom we will know as Avraham or Avram, and that this child would one day grow up to be a threat to his kingship. So Avram was spirited away and essentially was kept out of civilization and grew up in a cave. At the age of 3, he leaves the cave, and for the first time in his life, he experiences a sunrise. And he's completely enthralled. The beauty of the sun, the transition from darkness to shadows to light. And as the sun rises, the world wakes up. And as he's gazing at the sun, when it's at noon, it's impossible. And in his childish mind, he was thinking, this is the most powerful, the most beautiful object he has ever seen. This must be what is instinctively known as God. And he witnesses sunset with all of its beautiful colors, and God is resting, but suddenly he's transfixed, because when it gets dark enough, he sees the serene light of the moon, and he sees the myriad of stars, And in his childish imagination, this is like a queen. And all of these stars are her entourage. And there's a peacefulness and a tranquility that the night gives that the sun and the day does not. And he's thinking to himself, this must be the power that controls all of life. Until the second morning came and the night receded. And he came to a profound thought, which me and you could ponder the entire life. And that is, if there are two magnificent energies, neither one can be the sole authority. There must be a higher form of existence that is in control of these two magnificent concepts, day and night. And from the age of 3 onwards, he pondered, he meditated, he thought, until he came to the great, wise understanding, Abraham, our father. Fascinating, beautiful, and millions of Jewish children grew up with that story, and that propelled them on their own journey to think about who is and what is Hashem. But I often questioned, the story is magnificent, but why does it emphasize he was 3 years old? Why not just simply say, when Avraham was young, as a child he recognized God? And yet the Midrash is very clear. At the age of 3, he began to recognize God. And that tells me something very, very important. How old do you have to be to start thinking about God? The answer is even earlier than 3, but when the age of 3 is already a suitable time. Now, none of us could remotely imagine ourselves with the same intelligence, purity, innocence, and holiness of Father Abraham. It's just beyond our capacity. So what does that mean today, that a 3-year-old starts thinking about God? And I realized, yes, because if maturity means taking responsibility, a 3-year-old boy is now required, as a 3-year-old, to wear his kippah, his yarmulke, and to wear the tzitzit, the four-cornered garment, and to say a blessing. And as a matter of fact, he even has to accept the responsibility of looking not only like a boy, but as a Jewish boy. And one could say the same about the young girl, especially the way our holy Rabbi, Rabbi Schneerson, explained that when a 3-year-old girl will light her Shabbat candle, she, through her action, will change the world, bring more light, and actually enhance the entire family. And we're talking about a 3-year-old. But a 3-year-old is already of the level of an inner dialogue within himself. They cannot articulate it, but they're actually hungering and being attracted to spirituality. P.S. That is why little children will be involved in preparing for the Shabbat, singing Jewish songs. They actually are attracted to Yiddishkeit. Okay, off the P.S., getting back to responsibility. This idea of being responsible, when a little boy, until the age of 3, does not learn the alphabet, does not have to say the blessing, and frankly is just, he's allowed to be as natural as the long hair that's growing spontaneously. However, from the age of 3, there's a transformation. And now we go back to maturity. When you take the responsibility, so let's say the little boy shows up in school, in pre-1A, or in kindergarten, or in a, I forget what they call it, but for little children, often the teacher will say, did you bring your tzitzit? Are you wearing your yarmulke? Did you say a prayer? You're just a little kid. He's 3 years old. No, he's already going to be held responsible to do certain things. Obviously, myself included, we as adults, if we want to be more mature and actually develop our capabilities of greatness, the solution is not to take another vacation. It's to take upon ourselves responsibility to serve God and to serve humanity and to create a climate of goodness. Shalom.